interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Month.
Whole month of Courage, the Cowardly Dog. First appearing in 1996, it was picked up by Cartoon Network, who work in the middle of Burbank, and directed by cartoonist John Dilworth. Though many years have passed since the original air date, it's now time for Zack to celebrate this great show.
Well, old sport, what do you think? Neat. Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to Courage Month. So today's episodes we're going to be reviewing are Aqua-Farmer and Food of the Dragon. So let's get into both of those. Okay, so this episode actually is a kind of funny in that it's long story short, Eustace winds up challenging a dolphin to a water race. So it starts off with Eustace, Muriel, and Courage actually going to Waterworld, and there's also a couple of cameos from a couple of different people from a couple of different episodes that are there. Like the evil Empress is just there to visit with D-Lung for some reason. She's just there. Even though she got turned into a statue, but she's still there. But in any case, Muriel and Courage are both really excited to actually see the dolphin show, but Eustace is less enthused and doesn't think it's a big deal. So at which point we actually meet Jojo the dolphin and his trainer. The trainer doesn't have a name; he's just the trainer. But in any case, they start off with the training thing, and Jojo is established as an important, amazing performing dolphin, which annoys Eustace a little bit, and it isn't helped by the fact that Jojo actually winds up splashing him and getting him and his hot dog wet. So he isn't particularly a fan of Jojo. And even starts making angry remarks at him, telling the dolphin to actually watch where he's going, and also the dolphin just kind of does not care and splashes Eustace again. And at which point Eustace, kind of fed up, throws his hot dog at Jojo while Jojo is trying to do its musical performance part of the show, which winds up getting stuck in Jojo's blowhole, and Jojo blows it back out at him and shoots it at him. And then, as retaliation, grabs Muriel's popcorn, eats it, and then proceeds to blow it out at Eustace's face, which is finally the last straw for Eustace, and he finally decides to actually call Jojo out on the fact that he could easily swim circles around him and with one hand tied behind his back, which kind of understandably makes him a bit of a laughingstock in front of everybody. And Muriel even remarks that that's a terrible idea to challenge Jojo, because according to herself, Eustace hasn't swam in years, so he's kind of a little bit rusty and out of practice. But Eustace kind of doesn't care and rips off his shirt and overalls, revealing that he actually apparently wore his bathing suit on the off chance he would have to challenge somebody, but he proceeds to actually climb into the fish tank, into the tank where Jojo is, and declares that no fish is match for a man. And with that, they proceed to race, but it quickly becomes apparent that Eustace is completely outmatched. He immediately jumps in and sinks like a stone. He has no way of actually swimming, and Jojo even decides to actually start messing with him by picking him up and actually flinging him around all over the place, as per what dolphins do. And Eustace just kind of is a little bit upset that he wasn't able to actually beat Jojo, but he did. But as soon as he gets back on dry land, he demands that they haven't heard the last of him, and demands a rematch same time tomorrow. Which the trainer decides to announce to the crowd, pointing out that they're getting a rematch. And with that, they then proceed to finalize their deal off screen. With Muriel and Courage just kind of waiting for Eustace at the entrance to Waterworld, but eventually Eustace shows up and declares that if he loses, that Muriel is going to have to be the dolphin's sidekick, which Muriel and Courage are less than enthused about, so they decide that they're actually going to need to actually whip Eustace into shape and actually help him train. So what they start out with is by putting Eustace in the bathtub so that he can actually practice swimming and practice his strokes, but with Muriel just kind of gauging his time, but Eustace remarks that it isn't really helping, and that she's more distracting him than anything. But then his toe winds up getting caught on the drain, and he winds up going down. So he winds up going into the drain. And all but his ass are just inside the drain. So his ass is just sticking out of it. At which point he decides that the bathtub is actually not going to help at all. So what Eustace does instead is actually designs a contraption in the basement to actually help him swim, by just kind of hoisting him up in the air and actually just mimicking the movement so that he can actually practice the swimming that way. And then he tells Courage to let it rip. So Courage proceeds to turn on the machine, which works out well at first. Eustace is actually keeping up with the machine and is actually doing well, but then Eustace actually tells Courage to turn it up and make it faster, which Courage does, but then the machine breaks and it goes way too fast, and Eustace winds up hurting himself in that way, and winds up in a full body cast because of that. Remarking that and afterwards Muriel decides to cheer him up with some tea and biscuits, but he merely remarks that it's no use trying because he's a failure and he doesn't think he'll actually be able to do it. So at which point Muriel and Courage realize they need to actually take some drastic measures, since obviously if Eustace is unable to race, then Muriel will actually become JoJo's psychic, and she doesn't want to do that. So they decide to actually do a bit of a bait and switch to actually kind of trick Eustace into actually becoming a better person, which is that they dress Courage up as a world-famous psychiatrist, even though he's not, and while wearing a disguise, Courage actually hypnotizes Eustace into letting out in Muriel's own words, getting rid of his negative traits and focusing on his more positive ones. So Eustace winds up using that as a mantra to actually improve himself, and Muriel is just hoping that it works. So, but in any case, they decide to actually sleep in Muriel's rocking chair while they wait for the hypnosis to take full effect. And similar to that of a man emerging from a cocoon, Eustace actually blows up and gets bigger, and a new Eustace actually pops out of the old one's stomach. So and this new Eustace is a lot more confident in himself and feels a lot stronger and feels like he could actually take on the world, as it were. So he decides that now he's more than a match for any sort of dolphin. So they then proceed to get they then proceed to actually take Eustace to Waterworld, where they proceed to get ready for a challenge, and JoJo immediately makes catcalls at Muriel, which kind of upsets her and Courage a little bit. So they further cheer for Eustace to actually win. At which point they get ready to actually go through a bit of a gauntlet, which involves them going through a series of swimming, going through a series of hoops, climbing a rope wall, climbing over a thing of fire, playing a game of basketball, and then catching a fish in their mouth and ending up on the finish line. So yeah, this episode. So yeah, Courage does panic a little bit upon seeing the fire, but otherwise it mostly goes well for Eustace. The fish trainer actually remarks that it should be over pretty quickly, but what neither him nor JoJo were expecting was for Eustace to actually be, good at swimming now, because Eustace winds up doing the entire obstacle course, and JoJo actually struggles to keep up with Eustace a little bit. So the trainer actually intervenes when Eustace comes up to go snatch the fish, and instead he gets a face full of a bucket. Basically, the trainer decides that Eustace isn't going to actually win the match, so he decides to actually cheat by hitting Eustace in the face with a bucket instead of letting him have the fish, and then lets JoJo have the fish and continue on his merry way. Which does wind up snapping Eustace out of his hypnosis, and Muriel and Courage realizes this is bad, so Courage goes to where Eustace is swimming in the pool, he sends revert back to his "I'm a failure" mentality. So Courage tries to hypnotize Eustace into actually going back to his usual more confident self, but it doesn't work on Eustace because he just wants Courage to get away from him and just pushes him away, and then proceeds to actually continue swimming. But it does wind up working on JoJo and the trainer. So at which point JoJo and the trainer actually wind up birthing their quote-unquote new selves, which wind up being a small guppy fish and a gecko respectively. So yeah, they want, and the trainer now at Gecko actually tells JoJo to keep going, but JoJo is now in no way fit to actually continue the race because JoJo is now an actual fish instead of a dolphin. And Eustace winds up winning the race, much to both of their chagrin. So, at which point they return home, with Muriel just being happy that she now no longer has to be JoJo's sidekick because Eustace won the race. And both Muriel and Courage are just happy that Eustace got his self-esteem back, and it is now set up a giant fish tank in the middle of the living room, and is banging on the side of it, demanding somebody race him, which only causes him to break it and flood the living room. So, yeah, this episode is just fun because it's a kind of triumphant Eustace moment. He he writes a check that his body initially can't cash. His mouth winds up writing a check that his body can't cash, but he does eventually through a bit of hypnosis and some training of his own work, but winds up regaining his self-confidence and actually winds up beating JoJo in a race. So yeah, it's just him beating a dolphin in a race, and I kind of like that. It's kind of interesting. But in any case, that's my review of Aqua-Farmer. On to the next review. Okay, so this episode, Food of the Dragon, is actually kind of funny, and that's Courage winds up trying to help a dragon figure out why he can't fly, with a bit of an added incentive that I'll get to in a minute. But in case, the episode starts off in the Bag Farmhouse, and they're in the middle of their Sunday seafood luncheon, which the Bags just kind of except with the exception of Eustace, the Bags just kind of really commit to the bit on this. Muriel and Courage have actually dressed up in costumes to actually kind of sell the whole "we're in a pirate ship" thing. And they've actually decked out decor for basically the entire house now looks like the inside of a pirate ship, and they're going to be eating in the living room instead of where they usually eat, which is in the kitchen or dining room. But Eustace isn't really in the mood, pointing out that he really just wants them to hurry up and serve the grub. So Muriel then proceeds to sit them down and actually start serving them seafood. With Eustace winds up getting a lobster, Muriel gets a fish, and Courage gets some clams. And Muriel is initially kind of just happy about the whole idea and thinks it's grand. And points out that they should have done this a while ago, and that it actually does, and believes that the decor and costumes actually amplify the situation, and then proceeds to stab her fish with a pirate hook, that she has on her hand. Well, Eustace is just kind of struggling to get his lobster open so he can eat it. And also, Courage is struggling with his clams, but then he sees something move outside the window, and Courage isn't entirely sure what it is he's actually seeing, but he does freak out because he notices that something is out there, but he's not entirely sure what. But in any case, he then proceeds to see a large dragon outside that pokes its head in and mumbles about food. With Courage freaking out so hard that he accidentally sends the clam latched onto his nose, and eventually he does manage to pry it off, and it sends it flying into Eustace's lobster. With Eustace just kind of retaliating accordingly by picking up the parrot on Muriel's shoulder from her costume and proceeding to chuck it at Courage's head. In which point the dragon actually winds up poking its head in again and is about to eat uses a Muriel, but which causes Courage to freak out again, and his eyes wind up going into his clams, and they wind up getting stuck in there, and Courage winds up using them for eyelids, which is really, really funny. But in any case, he then proceeds to get Muriel out of the way, and the dragon actually winds up taking a bite out of the table instead. But then he winds up eating Eustace, who hasn't quite realized the danger, and actually winds up swallowing him whole, with Muriel merely wondering where it is he's actually gone to. And the dragon really remarks that he ate him, and Eustace even confirms that from inside the dragon's stomach, not that they need much convincing. At which point the dragon tries to attack them again, so Courage winds up going out the back door and runs toward the windmill, with the dragon actually following after them very closely. But in the process, the Courage and Muriel actually figure out something about the dragon as they're climbing the windmill, which is that the dragon apparently cannot fly. Which he reveals as he's chasing them is something he's self-conscious about. He reveals that he's actually all the dragons in his family are great flyers except for him. and he's very self-conscious about it because he was raised to kind of fly, but he can't. And Muriel actually winds up taking pity on the dragon, pointing out that she wishes there was something they could do. And the dragon remarks that she's kind, but also regrets that he has to eat her because that's who he is, and then proceeds to knock the windmill down and knock them to the ground so that he can actually eat them. But it's at this point where Courage actually winds up intervening Muriel actually remarks that she if she gets eaten, she'll have to stop being kind to the dragon. And Courage even tries to plead with the dragon, but the dragon merely remarks that he would eat Courage if his fur didn't make him sick. At which point Courage gets the bright idea to actually lick Muriel to keep the dragon from eating her, which the dragon remarks isn't really going to help since he would eat her if she was radioactive, in his own words. So Courage then tries to show him an expiration date under Muriel's hair, which doesn't even fix it, which doesn't deter the dragon at all, and is about to eat her. But eventually Courage does manage to actually strike up a bargain with the dragon, which is that he doesn't eat Muriel on the grounds that Courage figures out why he's unable to fly. So the dragon decides to actually agree to those terms and decides to let Courage figure out why he can't fly. So it's at this point, where Courage actually subjects the dragon to a series of tests. He has him run off he actually sets up a workshop in the barn to actually use as his makeshift lab. But long story short, he has the dragon do a running takeoff. He has the dragon run a flight simulator and a whole bunch of other things that don't wind up actually working. So there's one instance where Courage actually winds up putting a propeller cap on the dragon's helmet, and it runs out of batteries and he crashes, which just causes this huge nuclear-ish explosion. But in case the dragon becomes increasingly frustrated with Courage because they can't actually figure out how to fly, and by this point the dragon is in a full body cast because he can't fly, and Courage's experiments aren't really helping, and Courage has no real way of actually figuring out why the dragon can't fly. He's not entirely sure why that's the case, and at which point Muriel decides to come out and ask them how it's going, and the dragon merely remarks that because Courage actually couldn't figure out why he can't fly, that their deal is kind of moot. So he proceeds to actually try and eat Muriel again, and at which point Courage just picks her up and runs as far from the house as he can. He winds up taking them through town, which with the dragon chasing them on the streets, the dragon actually winds up running over D-Lung's car, which D-Lung probably deserved that. But in any case, he then proceeds to run them through the forests on the outskirts of nowhere, and eventually they wind up at a lake, where with the Courage actually running on the treetops to actually keep away from the dragon. And Muriel actually sees the lake and concludes that if the dragon can't fly, he probably can't swim either. So Courage decides to take his chances and they jump into the lake. At which point they think they're safe from the dragon initially because the dragon doesn't want to come into the water after them because the water's cold. But then they're actually greeted by another dragon of the same exact build as their own dragon, who not only is revealed to be a great swimmer, but also offers them some fish and chips and a whole bunch of other seafood related dishes as a treat. Since as he remarks, he's glad he was a water dragon and not one of the flying dragons that eats people. With Muriel not remarking that she didn't even know there were different types of dragons. At which point, it finally clicks for Courage why their own dragon can't actually fly, and actually swipes a fish pop from the other dragon to bring to their own dragon and to see if he actually likes the taste of it. And the dragon does indeed like the taste of it, even though he reluctantly decides to eat it at first because he thinks he's supposed to eat people. But when he finds out he actually likes the taste of fish and remarks that it tastes better than people, he realizes that he actually wants to have some more, and Courage proceeds to lead him into the lake, with the dragon being reluctant at first because he believes he's a flying dragon, and that going into the water isn't a very satisfactory thing. But he decides to kind of make the sacrifice and actually leap into the water to get some more, and discovers that his quote unquote wings are actually flippers, and that he's actually a much better swimmer than he is a flyer. At which point the other dragon recognizes him as his little brother William, and reveals that William apparently got separated in a storm at some point, and so William wound up being raised by flying dragons instead of seafaring dragons like he was supposed to be. So, which William concludes explains quite a bit. And then realizing that he doesn't actually like the taste, that he's always never preferred the taste of people, and actually does prefer the taste of fish. Remembers that he actually has Eustace in his stomach and actually winds up removing him from his stomach via like cartoon physics, where he opens like a trap door and Eustace just comes tumbling out. But in case, Eustace is just happy to be out of the dragon, and Muriel decides that now that they've made newfound friends with the two sea dragons, and they decide to actually continue their luncheon out in the lake, which works out well until Eustace winds up getting eaten by an actual flying dragon, and the episode ends that way. So yeah, this episode is just interesting in that. Long story short, this is a switched up birth story. If we're being perfectly honest, this is a switched up birth story where a sea dragon wound up being raised by a family of flying dragons, and didn't realize he wasn't a flying dragon, so he just kind of ate people, not because that was what he was raised to do. And then when he found out that he wasn't a flying dragon, and that he was actually a seafaring dragon, he realized it felt a lot more natural, and actually wound up finding his long lost brother in the process. So yeah, this episode is just about being a switched up birth story where the dragon wind up getting lost and thought he was something that he wasn't. So yeah, this is actually kind of neat and interesting, and I did indeed enjoy this storyline. And the dragon wasn't necessarily evil. It's just that he was eating people because that was how he sustained himself. That was what he believed was his main primary food source. He wound up being wrong because he was misplaced as a baby, but he wasn't really evil for that reason. He was just trying to eat Eustace and Muriel out of necessity, and he actually temporarily succeeded with the former. But yeah, this episode was just interesting, and I did indeed like it. But in any case, that is my review of Courage the Cowardly Dog. What do you guys think? Let's get discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks. I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch down in the description. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, schedule permitting. So just be sure to go check that out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. Also, be sure to check out my Discord down in the description below as well. We're actually going to be doing our grand finale of where we watch the movie live together. So and we go check that out down there. I had to do some changing around for that because apparently Twitch has the built-in feature where you can watch movies and stuff, but only if you don't have to rent them first, which is kind of dumb. So we're going to be doing it on Discord now. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!